Hey everybody, find the boys on Facebook by searching The Longbox, a month in comics, and follow them on Twitter at The Longbox MIC.
Hello and welcome to The Longbox, a month in comics. I'm Doug Hawkins, and today I'm afraid I'm on my own. We tried to organise a few times to discuss the subject matter of today with Dan Simpson and Danny Holmes. Didn't quite pay off, and I just thought that I would quickly get my thoughts down now before this movie, comes out of the public consciousness maybe, or even my enthusiasm dies for it perhaps. Spoilers. So today we're going to talk about the Justice League movie. It came out this weekend. Regardless of what I or you or anyone thinks about this movie, I think that this is probably worst case scenario for DC/Warner Brothers this weekend. It's been pretty disastrous. US box office weekend was 96 million. That's not quite half of what Batman vs Superman was, but it's pretty close. Rotten Tomatoes score is 41, Metacritic score is 46. The only saving grace at the moment is the user score is 84 for Rotten Tomatoes, so maybe, I don't know, the audiences might start to word of mouth and it might become a fan favourite rather than a critic favourite, but at this point in time that's probably clutching at straws. And this is quite interesting because, again, regardless of what I think of this movie, which I will come to, I think this is dire times for DCEU, because this isn't about this is where the kind of money guys are going to have to step in DC and be like, you can't be making these decisions anymore and can't be making these movies anymore. It's interesting because essentially that means that, I don't know maths, but let's say 30-40% of the audience that went to see Batman vs Superman on the open weekend is out. They've decided that they're not coming back, and I don't know why that is. Obviously I know why that is, because that movie isn't good, but what does that mean going forward? Does that mean that everyone involved in the Justice League, bar Wonder Woman, does that mean that these properties are now poisonous? Can we now make a Flash movie? Can we make an Aquaman movie? We can't make an Aquaman movie because it's been made, and that's the interesting thing. We'll have a freebie when that movie comes out next year and see how poisonous this movie is to these characters. Like Cyborg, can you make these? I don't even know if you can make a Man of Steel 2 anymore. I don't know what about this property. Obviously, the audience has been turned off by it. That's a definite. But what specifically has they been turned off by? And will Warner Brothers know these answers, or will they just kind of... This is the interesting thing. We've never been in this situation ever in movie history where... Because normally you just cancel a franchise. But I don't think you can just kind of pull the plug on this, because Wonder Woman is really successful. I think there's, Suicide Squad, although the worst of the DC movies, kind of critically, I think we can all agree it is. There's many. I think everyone's happy for that project to go forward, because we love the Harlequin and we love Deadshot and that. So whether that be a spin-off or a sequel, I think that can continue. So the DCEU as a shared universe will limp on, but it just in what form kind of fascinates me. I don't know. I would love to be a fly on the wall. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers aren't very good at explaining themselves or kind of setting themselves out like another studio. I don't want to keep making comparisons, but there's one or two other studios that are very good at kind of laying their hand out. I do suggest that Warner Brothers, or I hope they do, kind of don't go so gun-ho now and start making movies just kind of one at a time and see where they are, because the biggest problem of this is, if you track it back, is they went from Man of Steel, which is a film which I personally love, but is a unique take on Superman, and went down kind of medium with the critics and the audience, and didn't do fantastically money. I think it's remarkable that a Doctor Strange movie has made more than any Superman movie, but they've kind of taken that film and gone, okay, we're going to build a franchise on it, and not only are we going to build a franchise on it, that director is going to be the spine of it, and we're going to give him a trilogy, And then by the time Batman vs Superman came out, and then you had the problems with Batman vs Superman and the negativity towards that movie, they were pretty much about to shoot Justice League. So you know, the wheels are in motion. That's the problem when you kind of plan this far ahead. As soon as you start getting negative feedback, it's this big boat and it's hard to turn around. The person I feel sorry for is Jeff Johns in that case, because Jeff Johns was given power. I don't know what his exact title was, but he was seemed to be giving the majority creative control over this franchise after Batman vs Superman. But he hasn't had time to kind of show what he can do. So I hope he doesn't get shit canned, because, you know, Suicide Squad was pretty much shot. That was just kind of an editing thing. Wonder Woman, I don't know how much influence he would have had, but definitely not Batman versus but definitely not Justice League. Like I said, the script was locked down. I mean, of course him and Joss Whedon, when it came to the reshoots, which I'll talk about when I talk about the movie. Maybe he had a lot of kind of like influence and kind of discussion with that, but apart from that, it sucks that these films have kind of fallen on his watch, and it's kind of under his hand that this movie is what it is, or a failure box office wise and critically as is. That being said, I had a lot of fun with this movie. I watched it twice in 24 hours, I think. I went to see the earliest screening I can with Danny Holmes, and then with Dan Simpson I went to see it like 8 o'clock the next night after he finished work, and I had a lot of fun with it. I don't know if it's because I was just trying to think about the kind of the reasons why I was kind of so happy with it. I think it's perhaps I'm a big New 52 fan. Don't shoot me on that. What I mean is the Justice League run, New 52. I understand that New 52 is going to go down in history as a very bad idea, and I completely agree why. And, you know, you just have to read things like the Superman run, and you understand why that things needed to change there. Maybe things that they did with Harlequin, you know, have pissed people off. But I kind of avoided all the bad books through those years. I was reading Batman, Wonder Woman, and the Justice League, and they were all kind of very good books. And this film feels exactly like my Justice League, which is the New 52 Justice League. I remember hearing people kind of like complaining about the Whedon palette in this movie, and where, you know, color palette, and where did that come from? And it is from those books. And also the plot is pretty much like the first 6-issue run. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but there was a first 6-issue book called Justice League Origin, which puts the Justice League together to investigate parademons on Earth. Very similar to the premise of this movie. I found the characterizations quite unoffensive. Like, the Flash is an interesting take on Barry Allen. It's not Barry Allen, but I was having this conversation with Danny Holmes. I don't actually know what Barry Allen is. Every time there's a version of him, when I read him in the comics, I just kind of read him as generic kind of golden age superhero, maybe with a little bit more light-hearted. But like the Flareverse version kind of comes off a little bit more Peter Parker-y to me, and the version of the Flash I used to grow up with was the Wally West version. And I know what I can you know, define who Wally West is as a character, and his characteristics, but Barry Allen not so much. So I feel like this Flash is okay. It's fine. I had a lot of fun. He adds the humor to the group, which, when usually doing these kind of stories, it's Hal Jordan. Like, that I think works better if you had Hal Jordan in the team, because then you can play, you know, the tone kind of down the line, but then you can just have the quips from Hal Jordan. I think that would have worked better than the Flash, but as a substitute, I was absolutely okay with it. I will say that they didn't really do much with the running. Like, I know it's been done so well by, you know, or so well, it's been done so often recently. We've had a couple of Quicksilvers now, and we have a Flash TV series. So to bring anything visually interesting to the idea that you can run really fast is, you know, that was a challenge for them. I do like the lightning before he leaves. Like, you can see him kind of spark up before he runs as kind of a split second beforehand. But other than that, it doesn't really add anything to the table for that. Rather, other than, shall I say, a scene with Superman. There's a moment where he starts fighting Superman, and, well, the League start fighting Superman, and he starts doing his run, and he kind of realizes that Superman is just as fast as him, and I really kind of enjoyed that. That was a new kind of, like, okay, you're fast and I'm fast, and now we're both in the Speed Force, kind of, and that's kind of interesting. But yeah, like Barry Allen didn't offend me. I would happily continue to watch him in another movie, hopefully a better one. Cyborg, Cyborg again, fine. I only really know him from the comics. I think my biggest influence on my feeling towards who Cyborg is as a character is the Injustice games, and I think they just kind of got that fine. He plays it straight. He's really tense, like Victor is in or How I Imagine, and yeah, so I think they got Cyborg the character quite right. I don't think it looks great, but again, we could argue about that all the time. Like, how do you do Cyborg if it's not CG? It could be a character that you just avoid doing, but I just feel like because he's the line that he's part of the roster that we know at the moment. I think he was included for that reason, and yeah, whatever, it's fine. I kind of got used to the CG kind of Power Rangey transformery look of him. I'm really glad they didn't do the scene like about a year ago. I haven't had anyone really talk about this, but about a year ago, or was it the Comic-Con 2016? There was this moment where he flies up in the air and he kind of an entire mask builds over his entire face. It's like a battle mask, and it looked like a cross between an Iron Man mask and a Deadshot mask, and it really was not received well. But that is not in the movie, and I'm really glad they didn't go that way, because I've never seen that in the comics, and I don't see why that was needed, and yeah, bleh, no. So I'm glad that was cut out. Aquaman. So Aquaman's origin, Aquaman's characterization, I didn't hate. I thought going in that I was going to absolutely hate him. He seemed like he was going to be too bro-y, like Carl Brogo, I think I heard someone describe it as. No, he's fine. He's not annoying or obtuse or anything like that. Again, different from the comics, because Aquaman is, in my experience anyways, kind of being one of two things. He's either the big, muscly, bearded guy that is experienced king of Atlantis, and is, I don't know, maybe like boring Thor, like a real kind of hard to crack, maybe a character that you'd see in Lord of the Rings, like very regal but very badass in the way he is, like very droll, like not much of a sense of humor. I bet there's I don't know, think about the dad from what's the fucking film, How to Train Your Dragons or something. He's more like that type of character, or the more common one, which is very wet around the gills, or whatever the phrase is, a very green version of Arthur Curry. He's just kind of finding his feet and finding that he's part of this world, and the new king of Atlantis. And he actually, in my opinion, comes off more like Henry Cavill's Superman. He's kind of a version of Superman, but fallible, kind of loses his temper, tries to do the right thing, but when pushed, will lash out. Just kind of think about that scene in Batman vs Superman where Superman tries to tell Batman the truth about Martha, gets hurt a little bit, and then he's just like, fuck you, and they just start fighting. That is kind of what Aquaman is in the comics, and I understand why they had to go away from that interpretation, because we already have that character in Henry Cavill's Superman. So this is an interesting take. Fine, okay, like I said, pleasantly surprised that he wasn't too much of a bro. Some great scenes that I like in this movie as well. Like I've mentioned the fight with the Justice League fighting Superman. I like that because of the Speed Force moment. Really, there's nothing too much more to talk about in that. There's the Superman Flash in the third act. I love that bit. I'm trying to think of the scenes. It's all leaving me. So there's a moment where Superman and Flash leave the battle, fighting Steppenwolf, to go and save some people, and the Flash finds a van full of people who are trying to escape, and he grabs the back of it and makes it run fast and kind of escapes, and he's like, yeah, job well done. And then he looks to his right, and Superman has just picked up an entire building, block of flats, and was flying that through the air. And it's such a, like, we've not seen that in a Superman movie like for so long. We've just never been able to do it in the Christopher Reeves movie, and Zack Snyder had never been interested in doing anything like heroic with the character like that. So that was like a really fun moment I loved. I really liked the simple way of putting the team together as well. It wasn't convoluted in any way. It was very set up from scene one, of kind of like, Batman's like, okay, parademons, I can't deal with this, I need to get these metahumans to do it. I think this film also shows the I think Marvel kind of convinced everyone that you needed to, what's the word, kind of do an origin story for every character, an origin movie, shall I say, for every character that you're going to add in a team up. Where this film doesn't do that, or kind of shows that you don't need to do that. It kind of does it the X-Men way, which is like just a line of dialogue to explain who the character is. And then, okay, that's, alright, okay, so you got struck by lightning, Flash, yeah, that's an oversimplification of it. I mean, that might rub people up the wrong way, because I think the one in the middle is the X-Men. The way the X-Men do it is they show, don't tell. They actually show you a scene. So you, instead of getting an origin movie, you get an origin scene, or something that quite explicitly shows what that character's power is from an early stage, and then kind of move on. This movie doesn't do that, and I assume that was to set up what the standalone movies can do that. I don't know, but I've also heard that there's stuff on the cutting room floor that is that, where they kind of do the X-Men thing, where show a little bit of an origin in these movies, where this just kind of jumps in where they kind of all have their powers, but not superheroes. But yeah, I mean, I think that the criticism of this movie is it's really too harsh. Like, they're talking about it being like the worst movie ever made. I think this is better than, say, X-Men Apocalypse. And I understand that the standard is high for these type of movies lately, but I don't know, if this movie was made like 10 years ago, I think this would be, good to fine. Like, I think, good to fine. I think it'd be good to, some people's up there type of comic book movie. Objectively, though, I understand why this movie can't be considered a good movie. It's got too many movie mistakes, and I think that's where I'm torn in this movie for this film, where, as a comic book fan, and of that New 52 run as well, I'm absolutely, I appreciate how similar it is to that, and I get to see my characters live action. I say live action, though, I must say that I will say what I kind of tweeted to people when I first saw this movie is, it's a live action cartoon, and I think that it needs to be mentioned as well, as the fact that this doesn't feel like a what if. It's not like, what if this was real? The dialogue is really kind of cheesy, and the script is really convenient. There is no kind of third act twist. It's the villain has a plan, and he executes that plan, and the Justice League then kill him. That's and stop the plan at the 0 hour. That's all it is. There's no kind of nice little twist and turn. So as a comic book fan, I'm really like, oh yeah, I'm real chuffed, and I can't wait to see this a third time, and it will sit on my DVD collection next to my DC animated movies. But as a movie fan, it's objectively too bad to be classed as a good movie. Like, it cost $300 million to make this movie, and it looked like it cost at least half that. Now, I understand that's because of reshoots, but just be sure before spending that type of money. Like, maybe don't give it to someone who made a lukewarm received Superman movie. Like, maybe that's not what you should be doing with that money. And I don't disagree with the reshoots, because I believe, excuse me, I believe the moments of this movie that I love the most are the stuff that was reshot by Whedon. Just things about this movie, though, like the CGI villain, I can't defend that. There is no reason why you couldn't have put a man's face in that. Maybe it would look too much like it may have looked too much like the Wonder Woman villain, maybe. That's maybe why they didn't go down that route. And maybe they got stuff coming up that they want to use that kind of look for. Because one thing you would say about the DCEU, especially for the New 52, everything looks like that. That's kind of their design for pretty much anything that could be a lot of characters, especially when talking about the New Gods and Apocalypse and things like that. So, yeah, maybe that was the reason to kind of make it look different from any other character. Bruce's beard. Now, okay, this kind of brings me on to kind of a problem with this movie. I know it's a weird kind of segue, Bruce's beard, but this movie has moments which are kind of, when you think about it a little bit, you're like, what is this? So one of the things is Bruce's beard. The fact of the matter, there's the opening scene with Batman where it's setting up the fact that Ben Affleck's Batman is now Tim Burton's Batman. That's what it feels. They've built a set that looks so stylized to be the rooftop of Burton's Gotham, and he stops someone robbing a house, and he uses that guy's fear to attract a parademon. I'm going into this scene way too much. I shouldn't do. It's a cool scene, whatever. But from there, he kind of finds some information about the parademon. He's like, "Oh fuck, I need to go and find the Aquaman." So there he is as Batman. Next time we see him, he's on the mountains, and he's got a big old fucking bushy beard. Now, the film does not feel like he's been out months searching for the Aquaman. It feels like he's building this team quickly. It feels like the problem is imminent and they've got to deal with it now. So it's moments like that. It's just like, was there a version of this movie that made kind of that was okay and now it's not because if something's been cut? I don't know. Don't kind of get shitty if I'm wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure the opening of Wonder Woman scene, there is a moment where, there's some villains trying to bomb part of Paris, a bank or something, but I'm pretty sure there was an establishment in some dialogue that there was like 4 of them around the city. And then when the movie plays out, she only stops one of them, and that's kind of like job done. Again, I don't know if that's a wider scene that's been cut down, but if you are going to edit a movie down, you still need to make continuity make sense, and that's why you're doing reshoots. You've kind of got to sort those kind of continuity out. So it's kind of little niggly things like that that's kind of making my initial, I had a lot of fun with that, make me go, oh, okay, I can see why everyone thinks this movie sucks. Cyborg with his nonsense powers as well, that might fly in the comics, but in this it's just that, I mean, of course you stretch your disbelief. He can hack into every computer and he's kind of constantly online and is self-evolving and all these type of things, but there's a moment where they're like, oh, okay, we've got to get to the 3rd act, we've got to get to the final battle. I don't think my massive bat plane will get there. And he was like, oh yeah, for me it will. It's like, exactly what is your power? What, can you make an engine better? Because he's not out pushing it. I don't understand what kind of happened there. Like, did he kind of use his Mother Box X powers to make another engine? I don't know. You can also see this as 2 movies cut together, and because there's things just left over from the first. I was talking to Dan about this. Like, it's established that the parademons feed on fear, and they go off. That's what they're attracted to, and that becomes the villain's undoing. That becomes Steppenwolf's undoing at the end. Is after his hammer's been destroyed or his weapon has been destroyed, the parademon, he's fearful that he's going to get killed by the Justice League, and the parademons jump on him and kill him. That's their kind of out of like, oh yeah, we don't kill our villains anymore, even though that would probably be the one that everyone would be okay if you did kill. So yeah, the parademon, but I don't know, there's this thing with the Flash, like, he keeps mentioning through the movie, like, I'm afraid of this, and this is another one of my phobias, and I can't really... So I just found, like, it was weird that the parademons didn't jump on that, or I don't know if that was left over from a version of the script where they used... That was an arc for Barry Allen, like, he was being hindered by the fact the parademons were always asking, or they used that somehow in a battle sequence, don't know. There's a lot of talk about the Snyder Cut as well, and would that have been better? Because all the things I just mentioned is probably problematic from the reshoots and the cut. So, the question has been asked, if Snyder was just allowed to release this movie, would it be a better movie? There are kind of something's been leaked, some articles have been leaked that explain exactly what was in the Snyder version, and I don't think it would have been better. First of all, as I said before, anything that I liked about this movie, I think was the optimistic stuff that was added by Whedon. Maybe the reason that, like, there's a lot more dark side to stuff in the movie, so it's very in Snyder's cut apparently. So it's very clear that Steppenwolf is doing this for Darkseid, and if he fucks up, that's a problem, and that's kind of his character arc. That's his motive. That which I don't think he has in the final cut, but in apparently in the Snyder version, his motive is, oh fuck, if I don't do this, Darkseid's going to kill me. And there is a scene where he goes to Apocalypse at the end and gets killed by Darkseid. I think that may be cut because of downsizing, perhaps. Maybe, Warner Brothers, DC know that this was probably going to be received the way it was, and was just like, let's not set ourselves up for a fall. But having said that, there are other moments in this movie which is like, yeah, we're definitely moving on with this. So maybe that's the dark side is something that they don't want to move on with, but the other stuff is what they want to move on with. I must say, I haven't mentioned this yet, but I loved the after credit scene. Like, I've never been excited about an after credit scene like that in Marvel movies. Like, because Marvel, I love those characters. Well, I like those characters and I know who they are. But with DC, I fucking love those characters. So when Deathstroke turned up, I was like, yes, bitch! And what was great about that is that was a whole kind of bait and switch, because we thought that had been released a couple of years ago, that image, and it was released under the guise that Ben Affleck was shooting test footage for his now not to be made Batman movie, where Deathstroke was going to be the villain, and it was cast. What's his name? Joe. The guy who plays the Flash. Plays Flash Thompson in the original Spider-Man. I'm sorry, dude, I can't remember your name. I know he's a big D&D guy, but I can't remember his fucking name. All of that stuff was announced as part of the Ben Affleck movie, which was then cancelled, and therefore, he was being left out of the cold of like, oh, you're playing Deathstroke, and he was like, oh, I don't know, probably not, and feel a bit hard done by. But he knew that actually he was going to turn up in that movie, and I just fucking loved it. And then you have Lex Luthor. Can we continue with that version of Lex Luthor? He's hated, but he seemed to have toned it down for that scene. I think everyone's like, can you be more comic book Lex Luthor-y? So maybe, that is a version that we can now continue with. My complaint with the Deathstroke thing, though, is, on reflection, they cartooned up his beard and kind of way too much. So they've made kind of, it's kind of a pure white beard, and it looks really fake and cartoony, which is fine if that's the tone you're going for, but that now means that any director who wants to pick up that character is now has to do it like that, which is a shame, because like flecks in the, white flecks in the beard would have looked better, like the way it does in the TV show. Because I heard there was rumours that, which sounds amazing, that the director of the Raid movies was thinking about a Deathstroke movie, and that would be perfectly in keeping, and it would be it would be something different if he did that style of movie, and they could do it on the cheap because they can, it doesn't have to cost $200 million, and that would be absolutely perfect. But if it has to star essentially a cartoon character looking guy, then you got problems. So I wish they hadn't have made that decision. The last thing I want to complain about this movie is Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck is an amazing Batman. He's an amazing Bruce Wayne. Loved him in Batman vs Superman. His version of the character is not suited to this movie. I'm not saying he's bad in this movie, but what he brings to the table as Batman, and the reason that we loved it so much in BVS is it's a version of the character that is not used in Justice League. And I'm not saying he's bad, I'm just saying it didn't really work for me, or it was just like, who cares, essentially. I think there are better versions of Batman that would have worked better in this movie. I'll rephrase that. There are other versions of Batman that would have worked better in this movie. There's a lot of talk about him being recast in Matt Reeves' version and how everyone feels about it and say it isn't so. And Ben Affleck has talked about finding a cool way to bow out and all sorts of things like that. I'm in a situation now where go with whatever Matt Reeves' version of Batman is. Like, if Ben Affleck's version of Batman is the best thing for the movie that Matt Reeves wants to make, then try and keep Ben to stay. If it's not, don't try and force it. He doesn't want to do it anymore. I think he's had a terrible time playing this. He's, these movies have been hindered since he's joined. Not his fault at all. Like I said, he's been the one saving grace. But I just think he's had enough. He doesn't want to deal with this. He's not psyched like the rest of the cast to be involved in it. I think we should now move on. We can talk about, do we do a flashpoint to change the casting? Do you just recast? Do you do Dick Grayson? I don't really know. I think that has now changed. I think going into this movie, if it was successful, I think either he would stay, or B, do some sort of fun time travel flashpoint, like they did in Days of Future Past, where you're like, all the continuity that we want to change, we can do some time travel. I just don't, like I said, I don't know how poisoned these characters are now, and what roster Warner Brothers need to go to now. Like, are all these characters off the slate? Do they have to start making Deathstroke movies? Do they have to start making Green Arrow movies, some Martian Manhunter movies, a Plastic Man movie? Do they have to dig deep into their bench, start building up goodwill, and then you can do another Justice League movie? Do they kind of do a Gotham verse? Do you let Matt Reeves kind of build his trilogy of Batman, which may or may, I think that's what they should do regarding continuity. Just make films, and it doesn't matter if they are linked or not. Is this part of the DCEU? Who cares? If it's successful, then say it is, and then the sequel you give it an Easter egg to kind of confirm that it is. If it's not, bin it off and be like, that isn't part of our core line. In the same way that Green Lantern didn't affect the Nolan movies, I think you need to get into that, where a bad movie doesn't kind of drag everything down with it. But a good movie can then be added to it. So sorry, I was going back to Matt Reeves. I think, yeah, maybe build a trilogy of that. You know, Joss Whedon, he was in talks to make a Batgirl movie. I don't know if that's a guise now, like that was just what Warner Brothers said to everyone, the reason that he was in the door, and actually what he was doing was fixing Justice League. I don't know if he has any intention of making that Batgirl movie, but maybe you can make, you know, a little Gotham verse, you know, with that, and I don't know, a Nightwing movie, and you know, see how much goodwill that brings, and then after that's successful, use that Batman, this Wonder Woman, you know, whatever's become good, see where Superman is at the time, and then kind of in 6 or 7 years time do another Justice League movie. But yeah, they're gonna have to be licking their wounds, and again, like I said, I don't think we're ever gonna find out the answers to these questions definitively. We're just gonna have to guess with the clues, because they've never been good at kind of being like, this is exactly what we're doing. And when they have been, I remember once they did go, this motherfucker, look at our fucking roster, and they never stuck to it, never stuck to their dates. Everything kind of fell apart. They didn't have a plan. I'm just so gutted, motherfuck. I just wish this had worked, because I love these characters so much. Anyway, moving on. I just want to plug a podcast that I've been listening to, which is way better than the one that you listen to that's done by me, more regularly as well. So when we're not on air, maybe you should pop over there. It's another British podcast called Cinematic Universe. It's a fantastic idea. It's a film expert and 2 comic book experts, and they go through the history of comic book movies. Not that, yeah, it is the history they've been doing. They went back to, you know, Dawn of Superman, and they kind of discuss its merits as a movie and as an adaptation of the comics. The reason I bring this up, though, is because I wanted to liberally steal one of their ideas that they do on the podcast to quickly add to the Justice League. At the end of their movie, they have a recommendation where the 2 comic book experts recommend to the audience and to the film expert some comics you should read as kind of extracurricular for the movie that they've just been discussing. So I'm going to kind of do the same here and just kind of steal that idea. So if you like this movie, I would suggest that you read Justice League Origins, which is issues 1 to 6 of Jeff Johns' New 52 run of the Justice League. It's Jeff Johns and Jim Lee, I believe, doing the illustration on that comic. And it's very much this story. It would be really nice to go, okay, they did that differently, they did this differently. Slightly different roster than this, or is it? Green Lantern is added. I think that is the only addition. If you are kind of one of those people that, you know, GCSE English, you didn't want to read the book, so you just kind of watched the movie and then blagged your essay. If you don't want to do any reading, there is also an animated film called Justice League War. This is a straight up adaptation of Origins, but it's a really interesting comparison on how to do the origin. It's kind of like, let's take this comic book, what works as a movie, what doesn't, what needs to be added, and it's again the same story. It's the parademons come to Earth, Batman puts the Justice League together. It's kind of a little bit more kind of stumbling upon them while he's doing his investigation, and they come together to fight Darkseid. But in that, they actually do fight Darkseid. It's or see Darkseid at least. So I'd watch those 2 if you like this movie. With the comics as well, you can just continue. Like, I highly recommend all 52 of the New 52. Jim Lee, I think, jumps off after book 6, and it's Jason Fabok, I believe, is the illustrator after that, and arguably Jim Lee I fucking love, isn't it? He's probably my favourite, you know, comic book artist, but I do believe that Fabok might be better, or Fabok I believe it is, however he's pronounced, maybe a better artist for the tone that they're trying to go with the New 52 Justice League. Some great stuff happens within there. You know, they fight. I'm just trying to think of all the crazy stuff that happens in those 52 issues. There's Bizarro turns up. They fight the crime syndicate from Earth 3. Lex Luthor joins the League. He starts his own. There's this run called Forever Evil where he starts his own Justice League. There's a moment where like the B-listers have to join the League, so you have the expansion, the origin of the expansion of the Justice League as well. Yeah, and then that ends in a fucking epic comic called Darkseid War, which we've talked to death on this book. That's a run near the end of that 52 issues. It's absolutely fantastic. And actually, going on to Justice League War, the animated adaptation, that is kind of maybe, I don't know, maybe the DCEU should look at the way that movie kind of spawned a bunch of other movies step by step, because that started its own kind of shared in continuity universe with animated movies going forward. So from there they made the Throne of Atlantis adaptation, which is also one of the New 52 books. That's an interesting story, actually. They made, which I wasn't a big fan of, the animated film Throne of Atlantis, so they did that one. Then they did a Batman trilogy, which again I wasn't a huge fan of, but what came out of that was my love for Damian Wayne, and the character of Damian Wayne came out of that trilogy. So then they decided, okay, that works. So then they brought Damian Wayne into a movie with the Justice League called Justice League versus Teen Titans, and then from there they then did a Teen Titans, I'm doing this all from memory, what was the Teen Titans movie called? Judas Project or something, like a Contract or something like that. And it's just kind of, you can see how they've gone, okay, now that worked, now what's the next project, then that's worked, now that, and that is what I think that the DCEU should look at and kind of take that model. Okay, so what you should read if you don't like this movie. Like, I've been on a little bit of a couple of day pilgrimage thinking about this, because my only exposure really to the Justice League is the New 52 and those movies that I just mentioned, those animated movies. I suppose a lot of animated movies really, but trying to look around for comics to suggest. So I'm going to suggest Rock of Ages. Now that's a JLA comic. It was written in 1997, if I remember. It was, Grant Morrison, I believe, is the writer, and the artist is Howard Porter. It's just inspiring, but kind of optimistic artwork, I think I would say. It's kind of if you were playing the Justice League with your toys. Like the Batwing has like the the Burton symbol on it, and you've got Carl Rayner's Green Lantern as part of the team, and you have Aztec as part of the team, and you have the crazy blue looking, Superman as part of the team. I think this kind of shows kind of more of an optimistic kind of view of what the light version of what the Justice League is. It's kind of crazy intergalactic things going on. I don't want to kind of go into the plot with you, but yeah, and it's written by Grant Morrison, so it's kind of it's clever, basically. What turns out what could be just like silly nonsense comic, because it's Grant Morrison, he's doing some real smart shit in there. And, Lex Luthor is the main villain through some of it from the beginning, at least, and just some of the things that he kind of thinks about to fight the Justice League is quite clever. So yeah, I'd go and read that, and if you like that, just kind of read that run. That's quite good. Again, if you don't want to do the reading homework and you just want to kind of watch something, I would suggest Justice League Unlimited, which is a cartoon from the Bruce Timm verse. It wasn't the original Justice League cartoon that kind of got revamped and become Justice League Unlimited, where the bench again got expanded, and it's a really enjoyable series. The characters change, depending on what episode. So you're following Green Arrow one episode, you're following Superman, Batman, and Green Lantern team up in another episode, and it's kind of like the roster keeps changing rather than it being a team of 6, etc. And again, that's a very kind of optimistic feel. I'm not saying that optimism, and that kind of Marvel method is the tone that Justice League should be. I mean, that's one thing I will say about this new Justice League movie is I think they got the tone right. It doesn't need to be what BVS is. I think the best way to describe it is it just needs to be matter of fact. If a character like Rocket Raccoon turned up in the DCEU, when that happens in Infinity War, Tony Stark's going to make a joke about it. In the Justice League movie, if a character like that turned out, it would just be played straight. No one would really say anything. So I think the tone is kind of spot on. I think X-Men did it well as, let's take this seriously, but let's not make it dour. So I'm not saying that the New 52 is wrong and the pre-New 52 and Rebirth is correct, but if you want an alternative for what this movie is and what the Snyderverse is and what this new line of DC animated movies is, then yeah, I'd go to Rock of Ages and Justice League Unlimited. Okay, before I sign off, I will also say the new Doomsday Clock comic is coming out. I think it came out today. So run to your comic book shops. I'm sure we'll be talking about that soon. That is like the conclusion of Rebirth, not conclusion. I bet that we'll never get our answers really. But the overarching what's going on with Rebirth and what is kind of created that's all. It starts in the Doomsday Clock, which is released today. So I'll see you next time. I've been Doug Hawkins. Read more comics.